Meta, good or bad? Does it help build diversity? What really is going on? Now, this is actually a conversation that comes up quite a lot, and it is one that I am quite passionate about, but also I have a very different stance on this. So hopefully I'm going to be explaining my way of thinking, and because it's in my head and I'm a crazy person, I'm going to do my best to explain this with cars. Now, admittedly, despite being male, and shout out to my total of 13 female viewers, I actually know nothing about cars, minus Americans get really grumpy over it, Germans do them the best, and North Korea thinks this is a sports car. And already this has gone wrong. I mean, what are you thinking your sport is? Mass nuclear holocaust? Jesus Christ. Anyway, we're going to do this with cars, simply just because cars come in a vast variety of different forms that all perform in different manners, which is going to be quite helpful simply just because we can go F1 and go meta build. Obvious reasons. I mean, hell, we can even do tanks, obviously. I mean, we even have a car for Hutchler. I'm pretty sure this will be slow. So, I feel like cars are a pretty good analogy. Now, for me, the idea behind meta is to promote a build diversity. You see, what happens in cars is, once you have things like Formula 1 in place, people then start to try to push the boundaries. How close to Formula 1 can we get without being Formula 1? For this, we get cars like Bugatti Veyron. I don't know cars, so I'm probably just going to have to leave it there. Because we have a meta, we effectively have a build diversity that will look something along the lines of this. It helps promote the game as well as everything within the game. As good or bad as some stats may be, everything has a point and everything has a purpose. Pun completely not intended, however, effectively, the meta drives the other builds. How close can we get to the meta, but have it perform differently? Have it perform slightly less DPS, but have more survivability. Have it perform less DPS, but we get the option of different skills, more versatility, a different parameter for that build to work around under these unique circumstances. This is the idea of a meta. This is what the best is capable of. Put my hands here. This is what the best is capable of. What if we go here, but our scope for what this is able to do is larger? Meta build does this in this specific scenario. What if we bring down, but we get a larger scenario group? This is the purpose of it. F1 cars are great and all, they're really fast, but they only really work on F1 tracks. Take an F1 onto the M25 or I-95, like onto an interstate, on a country road. Is an F1 car going to work on a country road? Sure, they're probably some of the fastest cars out there with some of the best drivers in the world. Are they going to work on a frigging country road? Absolutely not, but that's why we have this bad boy. And just in case you're curious, a lot of the mechanics that go into these two cars, F1 and the rally car, are actually pretty similar. The calibrations for the suspension are the same. I had to do so much research with this. The only main real difference between these two cars, aside from their body and their shape, is the engine. That's like basically it. Now, for those people that are against the meta and promoting the meta, because if the meta can do this, if we just swap this one role, the whole build changes. This is like how build diversity works. But for those that are against this sort of thinking, one thing I like to ask them is, well, what would you replace the meta with? They always come back with the same answer: a greater balance. But then you're not actually having a build. What you have is skins. On screen now, bit of a weird one, but we have a FAMAS, base damage 44191, RPM 900, and then we have the FAMAS's DPS. Below that, we have the AK, base damage of 60,645, 600 RPM, and then its DPS. Below that, we have a weapon that I've called Magic. Okay, it's still going to have 600 RPM, but how much of a damage increase do we have to essentially give the AK to match the Dod-Foamath DPS? Ends up being about 9.3%. See how this works. Potentially you see where I'm going with this. If we now have our magic AK that does the exact same DPS as a Dod-Foamath, what is the point in either of them existing? Or at least one of them existing. Get rid of one. They both do the same thing. Now, there are going to be slight nuances with this, such as because it's got a slower RPM, the magic AK will have a greater uptime with something like Strained. But then at the same time, because it's going to have a slower fire rate, although it's the shot for shot, it's going to do more damage. The TTK, because of the DPS, is roughly going to be the same. This also then brings into question how other talents are going to work, such as fast hands on our magic AK. It's probably not going to work well at all. Fast hands on Dod-Foamath works very well. So all we've actually really done here is just replace a gear meta with a talent meta, at which point I can promise you now, if it weren't for things like spreadsheets, no one would know fucking anything. And then in having these two weapons be balanced, all you've actually done is make one of them, depending on how that talent meta ends up working, all you've done is make one of them completely redundant. There's literally no point to it existing. Kind of like how rifles are in the current state of the game. If it doesn't have the M1A in the title, there's no point using it. That's just annoyingly how rifles work at this point. Hanging out for a rifle gear set. Come on, devs. Now, don't get me wrong, balance is all well and good, but there has to be a best and a worst. There has to be. As in with life. Ever competed in a sports day? There's always a winner and there's always a loser. I mean, you could argue that everyone's a loser unless you freaking win. However, that is not exactly an appropriate adult response to those sorts of scenarios. There is always a winner and there's always a loser. Even if the difference between the winner and the loser is 1 second, there is still a difference. But sometimes, you never know, that guy that came in second place, although he was slower than first place, maybe he's good to run again immediately and still get basically the exact same time, where the guy that came first is done. He's pooped. He's got nothing left in the tank. Look at the bigger picture. Essentially, what I'm asking is, would you rather have this nice, diverse collection, pretty cars, or this? Because that's really what it comes down to. Now, I completely understand that not everyone's going to agree with my take on this, or understand what the hell I've even just said. To be honest, I'm a bit confused after all these car analogies. However, the point simply is, if everything was balanced, there's no point in anything. There wouldn't be any form of diversity within the game, because everything is going to work the same as everything else. All these weird and wafty different select builds that do very unique things under a unique circumstance, because if everything was balanced, it would all happen anyway. So there's no point. Causing the game to... Don't get me wrong, the game does need a few tweaks, LMGs and rifles specifically. However, to have everything completely balanced, no. Not at all. I feel like if we could get everything to sort of like the gap between ARs are all within 15% of each other. And the last 3 to 4% of that is just Eagle Bearer, where it is quite friggin' bad. But even then, that could be roughly fixed by just replacing the headshot damage with Detox, and then maybe giving us some form of a damage increase on the talent. Doesn't need to go back to how it was, completely stupid and busted. However, a nice rework of it will be pretty damn handy. I mean, at minimum, just let us put Detox on the friggin' weapon. And there are those that think I'm a bit of an elitist because meta. However, my simple stance on this, and it has been from the beginning, is don't take a rally car on an F1 track. That's literally it. Have fun, good luck, don't die. It's bad for the health.